probably pretty formative in my life was my mother, who is a Pittsburgh public school teacher, deciding when I was 18 to move the family to Paris. And she didn't speak a word of French. She'd never been to Paris. We had no money. And she made a homemade exchange in the newspaper inviting a French family to send their daughter to live in America and that my sister would go live in France. My sister did that, and then my mother said the whole family has to follow, which we did. And just the idea that at that moment the world totally expanded. And that we're living in a world where, in fact, when you bring the world into yourself and bring yourself into the world, there are these long-term repercussions. So for the last 20 years, every year I have a project in Paris. But I have no doubt that it was because when I was 18, I lived there for that year, and my world opened completely. Then when I was graduating from college, my mother moved to Kobe, Japan, for 5 years. And again, I could live in China, Japan, and India, leaving college and feel, oh, right, that is, again, an expanding universe. That we're living in this moment where the larger the worlds are that we begin to recognize, the more we also have this chance, when I say living there, of having a relationship that's intimate with something that you thought was distant. And switching this idea of distance and exoticism for intimacy, familiarity, and again, this kind of shared quality. All my life I've been very fortunate because I've met very, very extraordinary artists who have invited me to feel at home in very diverse situations. And so when I moved to Los Angeles, it was as the head of the Los Angeles Festival. And I was invited into Cambodian Los Angeles, into Salvadoran Los Angeles, into West African Los Angeles, into East Los Angeles and the world of Chicano artists and gang members, and all these worlds that I was invited into and invited to feel at home in. That was a really unusual experience. And that moment, Los Angeles was also discovering itself. And we began these conversations that moved across the city that were being initiated by artists that eventually ended up opening doors to business and political communities as well. But in fact, it was artists who were able to make the first points of contact and the first points of exchange. And when I say exchange, I mean, again, not on the old colonialist model of, you're just going to get something kind of as a parasite, but the opposite of what do we have to offer each other? What is the basis of equality? What is the basis of sharing? What is the basis of beginning to feel the city not as hundreds of little ghettos, including Beverly Hills, but actually de-ghettoizing our minds, de-ghettoizing our imaginations, and beginning to move in a way that starts to be give everybody a new set of possibilities. One of the most difficult things about American commercial culture and media is that it's possible to cheapen anything. And so how, in the act of democratizing something, do you not cheapen it? Do you not dilute it? Do you not, in fact, betray it? And the 18th century artists worked on this a lot. Why they invented oratorio. How do you take the most profound sentiments you have as a human being and not make them sound corny and horrible when you share them in public? How can you maintain something that still feels deep, and at the same time sharing it with a very wide range of people in as public a way as possible? So for me, over the years, it's really come to be this task of creating a protected zone. Something that can protect things we care about. Let them incubate. Let them grow stronger. Let them extend themselves, but in a way that's protected, that doesn't lose the meaning or intensity or sacredness of the original content. One of the things we have to do as artists is always locate this place of trust, because in the world that people are living in, you can't trust the bank, you can't trust the government, what can you trust right now? Where is there something you can trust? For me, one of the most important parts of the work of artists right now is to make something that people actually could bank on as being true. And I'm a really old-fashioned artist. I do think the job of an artist is to talk about truth. When it's in short supply and it's really difficult to locate, that's all the more reason why we should take our traditional role as people who are concerned with how do you articulate something that's actually true. And in what way is truth an active presence in people's lives rather than a passive presence? In what way does knowing the truth make you free? In what way are those things linked? And if we're really asking those questions about freedom and human potential, human agency, can we actually say that truth, power, is going to help us when the other power grid is down? What art does is put something in front of you in a way that reminds you where we're ultimately trying to go, and that holds it there, even when you're disappointed day to day that we still have not achieved it. So, Romeo and Juliet, it didn't work out. Yes, they tried to bring the Montagues and Capulets together, and you know what? It just didn't happen. But that they tried, we still talk about 500 years later. Martin Luther King did not end poverty in America. That he decided to spend the last 3 years of his life on earth doing that? Was it a mistake, a folly, a ridiculous thing? A failure? That failure has more honor than hundreds of other successes and remains in front of every generation to come. Is something that goes forward in time. And that's what we're doing as artists, is making a marker, an act of testimony, something that you can put forward that remains something to aspire to, that is a statement of what we're actually aspiring to, that is not just trapped in this is where we happen to be today, but reminds everybody that we're walking towards those mountains. And so you need to have those mountains in your sightlines. And so that view of the horizon, that sense that there is a mountain range ahead, is the purpose of a work of art. And that it outlives your day-to-day experiences and actually somehow makes them bearable, the setbacks and the advances. That the work of art has a longer life than that, and is also something that a later generation can use as something that a previous generation is handing on to them to say, keep chipping away. You may want this chisel here.